Welcome to this marketing masterclass, the future of coaching, today with Helen Isacke. We'll have a chat with Helen and we'll do the intros with her shortly. But for those of you who are new to the channel and to us, my name is Simon Batchelor. I'm one of the co-founders of Better Bolder Braver, and today we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and that's me checking that we're live on LinkedIn over there. So welcome, everybody. I will pass over to the other co-founder of Better Bolder Braver, Frances Isacke. Hello, Frances.
Hello, Simon. Hello, everybody. My name is Frances Isacke. I am the other co-founder of the Better, Bolder, Braver community for coaches. And we're delighted today to have Helen Isacke here, the founder of Trusted Coach Directory, so another community host. And this year, we dedicated our Marketing Masterclass series to speaking to experts in the coaching sphere about what they think the future of coaching looks like. And so today, Helen is going to kindly share with us her thoughts on the future of coaching. First of all, Helen, welcome. I'll invite you to let us know how you're arriving, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And also to give everybody if you don't mind, a potted history of you, because you have a very fascinating story. So that is where we will start, if that's okay.
It's fine. Oh, I don't know how potted I can make the history. Well, let's just keep it to the coaching context. But first of all, thank you very much for inviting me along today, to both of you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great. So, I suppose coaching history, I think that's probably more to the point. I started my coaching journey back in 2003. So, oh my God, I feel so old. 20 years ago, I did my very first coach training program, trained with the Coaching Academy. Back then, they were saying they were the most established coach training school in the UK, and they'd been going for 5 years. So that's how new it was back then. So I did my coach training, and having a background in marketing, I was very keen to get out there, do lots of networking, build my business. So I trained to be a coach, and that was my first coach training. And then as a coach, most coaches will continue to do lots of other training as well. So I packed in my day job I think it was at the end of 2004, and launched myself into marketing the business. Very quickly, I was approached by a leadership development training organisation who asked me if I'd like to do some executive coaching with them. My thought was, well, what's the catch? And as it happened, there wasn't a catch, and I was very lucky. They gave me lots of executive coaching work, but I was still out there picking up my own clients as well. And I suppose what I was going to talk about today was just all the mistakes that I made, even though I'd had a background in marketing. It doesn't prepare you for running your own small business like this, particularly in an industry where a lot of people didn't understand what coaching was, and still don't to a degree. There are many coaching coachees, organizations, managers, individuals, they get coaching confused with training, with mentoring, with therapy, with counseling. So back then, and still now, it's really educating people as to what coaching is and the benefits and the power of coaching. And so from setting up my business at the end of 2004, I just got stuck into doing lots of coaching, but doing other things as well. And then it got to 2016, and there'd been so many bumps along the way with credit crunch, lots of different things happening. And I was doing a lot of associate work, and different projects were coming to an end. And so I was just reviewing what else do I need to do to keep the clients coming through, as you do. And one thing that I noticed had got me in front of a different market, not necessarily the right market, was being on a directory. And in fact, it was the life coach directory, even though I wasn't a life coach. Got me a couple of inquiries. A lot of inquiries were not the right ones for me. And I was thinking, I would love to be on a directory for executive and leadership coaches. and very flippantly said, and if I can't find one, then I should build one. Obviously not me personally, but I just saw there was a gap in the market. And that's where the Trusted Coach Directory came from, was to create a platform to promote primarily executive and leadership coaches, to help coaches to raise their profile, but also to help organisations know where to go to find those coaches. Because a lot of people I was talking to when I went to CIPD events, they weren't sure what to look for in a coach. And there are lots of people, and I think still are people out there, who say they're a coach, they're an executive coach, because they've been an executive and maybe they've had a bit of coaching. Doesn't make them a great coach. It doesn't make them a coach in our model of the world. They might be a great mentor, but not necessarily coach as we would know it from all the training we've been through. So that's where I've come to really with the directory. It's about raising the profile of professional coaching, professional coaches. It's about raising the credibility of coaching, because anyone can call themselves a coach, and they do, with no training whatsoever, or very little training, maybe a weekend course. And so for me, I wanted those qualified coaches with all the right credentials who do what I say, do things properly, because they have supervision, they do their CPD, they're a member of a professional coaching body. I wanted somewhere where they could promote themselves. And it's about raising the standard of coaching as well. That's important to me. So not such a potted history, but hopefully it gives you a flavour of where I am, what's brought me here.
I think it gives us not only a flavour of your experience, your authority and your empathy, but also I think we can sense into that, Helen, the passion that leads me to my next question, which is, what would you like to see change in the future of coaching?
I don't know whether you're expecting me to say I'd like it to be regulated. I don't think regulation's going to happen. I would just like there to be some more rigour, an education piece around engaging a coach. So those people who are engaging a coach, whether it's an individual paying for coaching out of their own pocket, whether it's an organisation, a senior leader, that they understand what to look for in a coach. Because if they are if they meet somebody at a party or a networking event who's saying, yes, I'm an executive coach, and they engage that coach and they are not a qualified coach, they're not affiliated to a professional coaching body, they don't do their CPD, etc., then they're probably not going to get the kind of experience that a professional coach would give them. And then they'll come away from that experience going, oh, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? I could have gone and had a chat with my mate down the pub, because it wasn't a proper coaching conversation or contract. So I think it's educating people as to what quality coaching is and what to look for when engaging a coach. That's what I would like to see. So it's a big education piece. As I say, I don't know if regulation would sort that out. There are so many different coaching professional bodies and they all do things slightly differently. They all have a few of them are collaborating to have the same code of ethics, but I can't see them all coming together, and regulation is a big onerous project. It's an education piece. That's what I would like to see, but I'd also like to see coaches having the confidence to go out and build their own coaching business, because I've seen too many fantastic coaches who are qualified, they know what they're doing, they get great results, but because they don't have a marketing expertise, possibly, then they don't know how to build their own business. And actually, maybe that's not the right way forward for them. Maybe it's a different way, that they're an associate, they're in some kind of partnership, joint venture, that's fine. But I love coaching. In the early days, people thought, oh, it's just a fad, it'll disappear. Well, clearly it's not, and we know the benefits. So, let's make it as accessible to as many people as possible, which is what the digital coaching platforms are trying to do, and they're democratizing coaching. And when they were all starting to come through the last few years. I thought, is there a place for the Trusted Coach Directory and the external coach? But I've been reassured by several people in big organisations saying, yes, okay, we use a digital coaching platform, but there is room for, we would go to an external executive coach for our CEO or for our very senior leaders. It's a different kind of relationship. So the landscape is definitely changing, but I don't think the external coaches need to stop worrying because of the digital coaching platforms, because of artificial intelligence coming through. That's the other concern. I think there's always going to be a place for the external executive coach. The great thing is there are lots of opportunities now for internal coaches to be employed. That's what I was looking for 20 years ago. I would have loved to have got a job as an internal coach, but they were few and far between and much sought after. So I think there are a lot more opportunities now to coach, which is fantastic. It's just fantastic to give anybody the opportunity for that.
Well, let's take it from there. Something that we talk about often in our community is something we call the work-work balance. And so we're in the business of trying to dispel the myth that there are lots of coaches out there from day one making millions just from coaching. That's the first thing, is to give people permission to be human and have to do a few things, at least at the beginning, to make ends meet. But more to the point, in fact, is how enjoyable it can be. Some people call it a portfolio career. That's the kind of corporate language used around this subject. A number of hats being worn all at once, and the creative bit is seeing the thread that laces them all together and then capitalizing on that connection to speak more proactively and articulately about how you stand out over and above someone else because you have this other skill set or area of expertise or experience or network. And I'm interested in how what trends do you see? How many people in your community have this kind of work balance? How many people are clear about what it is that they want in terms of the portfolio of work, and sort of how do you support them in building that up? Because you say you care and you'd like to see more people be able to do that.
Oh, there's quite a few questions there. I'm just trying to think how to unpick it, really.
Sorry.
Because I'm talking to a lot of coaches all the time. We've got, 85 or so coaches on the directory. We have our community coaches. They're all at different levels. And I think the more experienced ones are very clear on where they are. And they do have a portfolio. They have a blend. I think you made a really good point in that I think having a portfolio is important as a coach. That was one of the mistakes that I jotted down somewhere when I was thinking about the mistakes I made. And it was this belief that I could just fill my diary with one-to-one coaching clients that I went out as I found through networking. I mean, I have spoken to one coach who does that, but blimey, there's a real big marketing engine that goes in behind that. So yeah, having a portfolio is really important. I think it's hard to answer your question as to the trends because it's just, I don't see a set trend. It's all over the place, and I would have to really, I'd have to really sit down and do analysis, and that's not me really. I just like having conversations and talking to people. So I'm not sure I can tell you what the trends are. What I do know is that a lot of coaches have a variety of offerings. So they will, and they might have come to coaching because they do leadership development anyway, or they've come from the corporate world and they've been in L&D and they put together leadership development programs, and then they got into coaching, and so they want to build the coaching side of it. So I would say the majority, and don't ask me for percentages because I, be a finger in the wind type of thing. Majority of people, I would say the split could be, again, big guess, but it could be 60% doing workshops, leadership development programs, and then 40% coaching. And most coaches I speak to want to increase the coaching side of it. They want to do not just the one-to-one, but doing team coaching as well, group coaching. And team coaching is definitely growing. So from a future of coaching, that's really building. A lot more coaches are training to be a team coach. There are a lot of coaches who say they're a team coach without necessarily having the training behind them, but they've got such a lot of experience of working with teams. And you've got group coaching, team coaching, facilitation, all slightly different. I was saying we've run webinars in the past talking about what those differences are. So team coaching is growing. And then you've got the supervision side of it, and some supervisors are almost supervising leaders, so using their supervision skills with leaders as opposed to coaching. So they're supervising on their leadership skills rather than coaching, which is another big topic, I think. So answering your questions.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that. I hadn't thought about. I mean, clearly I understand. Well, not clearly, but I have a concept of how, you know, supervision works is very important for your community members and for your clients. But the idea of actually then also supervising leaders who might be in coaching with, you know, so there's like different levels of the supervision, which I haven't really considered. So that is interesting. Can you talk to us a bit about how you support, you mentioned earlier, and we've talked to you before about sort of how important it is for your database to be profiling themselves in a way that does them justice to your clients, customers. I don't know how you profile them.
As in to promote their profile, as in to how they construct it and get their message across.
Yes, and how you support them in doing that.
Yeah, I do. Well, any coach that comes onto the directory and they have a full membership, that includes my time. So, a coach, when they go live on the directory, so we'd have a profile review. So I'd look at their profile page on the directory, and we'll look at it and not pull it to pieces at all, but look at what's in there, what's missing, and is that profile actually talking to their ideal client? Because it's very easy when you want to go onto a directory, you just want to get your stuff, you want to fill in that form as quickly as possible. I know I would do, hate filling in forms, but the content that you put up there is really important because it's your shop window. And on the directory, there's a section called About Me, where there's plenty of room for free text. And because it's labelled About Me, quite rightly, it's very easy to just write about yourself. You know, I'm Helen Isacke, I've got these qualifications, this is my coaching style, I'm wonderful, this is what, you know, blah, blah, blah. So what I do is help coaches to structure that in a way that it demonstrates who they are as a coach, their uniqueness as a coach, because you know, if you've got 100 executive coaches, you've all got the same title, but you're all so different. So what's different about you? But also it's about talking about the kind of clients that you work with. So yes, that profile, it's about me, but it's about who I work with as a coach, which industries do I have expertise in? Because even though as a coach, we can work with anybody. It doesn't matter what their industry is or their title is. You're working with a human being and all of their psychology and their motivation, etc. But organisations like to know that a coach has got experience in that particular industry. So, and you're trying to grab credibility straight away. So the first bit was really grabbing credibility. So it's establishing, you know, how many years you've been a coach for, maybe some of your qualifications, but just very succinctly, that credibility piece. And then talking about, these are the kind of clients that come and work with me because these are the challenges that they've got. So if you know what your niche is, and if you know who your ideal client is, you understand their language, so then you can start putting those phrases, those challenges that they have in your profile. So, you know, I work with new managers who are feeling overwhelmed or out of the depth, or they've got imposter syndrome, or however that manifests, so that somebody who's your ideal client when they come onto your profile page, and that's another story how they get there, when they read that, it has to resonate with them. So they think, do you know what? Helen works with people like me and they get results. So I want to go and work with her. I want to at least have a conversation. So that profile has to talk to your ideal client. And also, what are the results that your clients are getting having worked with you? I think it's important to do that. And not all, but quite a few coaches are a bit backwards and coming forwards and saying, do you know, I'm pretty good at what I do. So it's important to say, this is what my clients say about me. So tell people what do they say about you? What do they take away? What do they like about your style? And of course, it's important to describe your style as a coach, because there's so many different types of style. I think most coaches are challenging yet supportive, and yet an awful lot can come into that as well. And helping them also to, once we've gone through the structure, I probably missed out bits, it's always having a strong call to action at the end of that. What's the next step? There always should be a next step. Contact me if this resonates with you, or if you'd like to find out more, book in a call with me, email me. You want to have a conversation. Most coaches say, I'm fine. As soon as I get in front of somebody, I'm fine. So it's what's the next step. And another part of it is, which I think links with it, and probably not in one of your questions, but it's just something that came to mind, was one of the coaches I was talking to a couple of days ago, and he was saying to me, I've got this great, I put together this program, a leadership development program, and I really want to get it out there. I'm going to offer a discount because I want to get experience in delivering this program. Maybe it's a pilot program. So I was saying, well, what have you done already? And he'd put a few posts out on LinkedIn, just saying, I've got this great leadership development program. Normally, I don't know, £5,000. For you, it's £3,000, whatever. And so I said, so are you sending that to people that you know well? He went, no, not really. I've just put it out as a post. And he said, I put it out a few times. He said, I've not had any bites at all. I said, well, okay, there's going to be quite a few reasons for that. And just got him to break it down. And part of that program was using 360, using Belbin, some other tools. And so I was saying, actually, it's like, and other marketeers make this analogy. You go on a date, you don't expect to jump into bed on the first date. Not many people do they? It's about, it's nurturing the relationship. It's going out for dinner. It's just getting to know each other. It's building the relationship, and it's taking things a step at a time. So I was suggesting to him to maybe write a blog about 360-degree feedbacks and what happens when you don't have them. And why do we shy away from 360 feedback? So, it's just starting the topic. And then maybe offer somebody that when was the last time you did a 360 feedback for you and your team? Here's an introductory, let's do this. So that team, that senior leader can sample his work, this particular chap, and then there's an opportunity to upsell, then there's another opportunity. So and there's lots more to it, but I'm probably going off track.
No, not at all. It's the energy with which you come at answers, and the things that pop into your mind that I think tell our listeners how much you care about the support that you give to people. And we would call you somebody in our marketing family, as we refer to it. And we're very much in the business also, as you know, of trying to help people do best by themselves, by putting themselves out there. And, you must see this also as we do, that people are so busy trying to put out the best version of themselves, trying to call action, trying to invite conversation, that they sometimes lose sight of how it's also a filter for them then not to be doing work or getting inquiries from the kind of people that they don't want to be working with. And when time is so tight and conversations can be time exhausting and energy exhausting, it's the other reason for being able to niche down and be clear, is that then what you're attracting is the kind of people that whose energy you would like in your life. And so these questions that you are encouraging people to ask, which we call the journey of consciousness, and I love your analogy of the dating, we invite our community members to consider at what point they're meeting somebody, as it were, in their communication. And sort of to your point about education, where do they need to take them slowly, perhaps, and gently, to a point where they realize that working with this coach is probably the right fit for them. But it's just as much the opportunity for the coach, right, to try to work out if they're going to be a good fit in the bigger picture of what they're trying to build by way of a sustainable coaching business. What are your thoughts? Do you agree on that one?
Again, there's lots of different points that you put out there. Yeah, which particular point? Sorry, because there were so many different little threads coming out. I wasn't.
Yeah, I do that. It's the thinking out loud thing that I do all the time. So I guess the question is, do you see editing out clients as being as important as attracting them?
Yeah, and when you edit them out by how you position yourself, but you need to know how to position yourself, which goes back to having the niche. If you're really clear on who it is that you want to work with, and you let people know, I work with this category of people with this type of challenge, then you could share that with anybody. You could share it with your partner, your family, your neighbours, so that when they're having a conversation, they hear that somebody's in that situation, they think, you need to go, and you need to, it'd be really useful if you went and had a chat with Helen, with Francis, because they know who it is that you work with. Having said that, when you have a niche, doesn't mean to say that you turn people away if it's somebody that you want to work with. I think it's really useful to have a niche, because it's what and who you're known for, who do you work with? It's important. I think people shy away from having a niche because they worry that they can't work with anybody else. And that's not true at all. As long as you're working with your clients for the right reason, and not just because you're desperate for the money, because then, something else comes into that straight away. And actually you have to be quite courageous to turn business away if your gut is telling you it's not the right thing, or they're not the right client, when you've got a mortgage to pay. That can be quite a difficult one.
Totally. On the subject of money, our listeners are always interested to hear about money, I think, is the honest truth. And, this is curious situation in the coaching industry, which is there's of course quite a range. How much do you find yourself in the position of being asked for advice about that, about pricing?
A lot. And interestingly, I had an inquiry from, I think it's a university. Had a week where there seemed to be lots of inquiries coming through, and a couple of universities, a county council, one of them said to me, we're looking for an external coach for one of our very senior leaders. How much, can you give me an idea of how much your coaches charge? This is for executive coaching. And I said, that depends. Obviously, as I said before, I talk to the coaches a lot, and I do try and get an idea of what they're charging. When I ask what they're charging, I get a similar response. Well, it depends. It depends, doesn't it? And so I said, I'm just going to do, if you can just bear with me for a couple of days, I'm going to do a quick straw poll, and emailed about 50 coaches on the directory, just gave them the scenario. And I said, look, just a really quick answer. In this situation, working with this particular leader over 6 sessions, for example, and I was going to say, what's your hourly rate? Now, not all coaches charge by the hour, a lot charge by the program. That's another discussion. And we've had many of those on the directory in our webinars. If you could break it down into an hourly rate, what would that be? And when that came back, so about 30 responses came. There were 30 responses, I know there were. do you know, it ranged from, and this was working with an executive in a, I'm pretty sure it was the county council. I'm trying to think who it was now, but I'm sure it's the county council. So they weren't a huge blue chip, organisation, but neither were they charity. Those hourly rates came back between 150 an hour to 500 an hour. So a really broad range. The middle of the range, I would say it was between 250, 350 an hour. That's what it was. And that was based on typically a 6-session program spread over roughly about 3 months. So working in that environment, it is roughly, I'd say, roughly about 300 an hour. So that's working with a senior executive. Now, I mean, that was an average. Some coaches, they wouldn't have looked at it for less than 500 an hour. Other coaches would have been really grateful to get £150 an hour. So, yeah. So that's what it would be if they were actually going out and actually getting their own piece of business.
Mm-hmm.
If it was an associate, it would be a different rate. If it was a different type of organisation, it could have been more, it could have been less. If it's a local firm down the road, it would have been a bit less. So there are so many, it depends. Yeah, definitely depends.
It's interesting to hear you talking about pricing by the hour, in fact, even though that is traditionally what people think they're supposed to do. And, certainly we're in the business of inviting people to consider pricing in a different way. Because when I think about corporates and coaching, I think my idea is that there's more conversations about programs, there's more conversations about outcomes, there's more conversations about, the journey that you're taking someone on and what that price is, and the kind of experience, the cadence, rather than the hour. And so, it's interesting to hear that is still the conversation.
It is conversation, and I think it was just to get a very quick, broad brush, really. And I think there aren't as many coaches now who charge by the hour. It is typically by the program, but sometimes it's just easier to compare apples to apples by saying an hourly rate, rather than if I just said, oh, what would you charge for a program? And I would have had 30 different answers saying, well, I charge £5,000 for a program, which includes this. Somebody else would charge twice as much, which includes something totally different. So it's really hard to get a benchmark. So I just wanted a really quick, rough idea that I could go back to. And talking about pricing, there was somebody else that came back to, actually, funnily enough, in the same week. And I think it was university, and this contact said to me, she said, oh, one of our senior executives wants me to put this executive coach on the books. They've been brought in and they want to be, part of our procurement preferred supply list. And she said, before I do that, I just want to, can I just run a few things past you? And I, well, yeah, of course. She said, so what criteria should we be looking at, do you think, to have executive coaches on our preferred supply list? She said, because I know you've got quite a stiff criteria. And I said, well, this is what we would check, what we would look for. And she said, and again, it was the same question. So, and how much would they normally be charging? And I said, usual, well, it could be this and it could be that, depends on this and depends on that. And I said, do you know how much this particular coach is charging to go on their preferred supply list? And she said, yeah, that's what I'm worried about. So my initial assumption, quite wrongly, was, it's going to be overinflated. And she said, well, he's just charging £2,000 for a program. I said, well, what's the program include? And she said, the average is six sessions over 3 months. And I went, oh. She said, I know. She said, that's not a lot. And I said, so what would you normally be paying? She said, about 3,000, 3,500. So it was interesting. It was reassuring that we were in the right ballpark, and a lot of the coaches are charging not a dissimilar rate for that type of level. But the fact that she was put off by the fact he was undercharging. So there can be this overcharging and the fear, am I charging too much? You know, am I going to give enough value? But there's that also fear of not charging enough, which is why it's such a contentious issue. And because of that, I have said, oh, right, I want to do a survey on this. I'm really interested to find out, you know, do a big matrix. I think it's quite a big piece of work, actually. What I thought, oh, you know, I can sort of brush it off in an hour or so. It's still sat on my desk thinking, right, when I've got an afternoon, I'll put my head to it. I think it needs a professional researcher to do it.
It's an interesting one. Simon, you've got a lot of experience thinking about this. What are your thoughts?
I think it's always a difficult thing to just summarize a price, because it's like asking someone how much is a car. It's like, well, it varies enormously. You know, you can go from like a Kia, tiny little Kia, up to a Rolls Royce. It depends what you want, doesn't it? What your needs are. You know, a big 4x4 thing is totally different to a city car, and all this. You know, exactly the same applies in advertising, coaching, business consultancy. It's all this, and I think it always amazes me when someone I generally find who's fairly inexperienced in buying will insist that there is an hourly rate attached, or because that's all they've got to go on as a barometer of who's good and who's not. So yeah, I completely resonate with what you're saying there about the pricing, but it's also really interesting to hear about the fact that this person had reservations because someone was undercharging. And I think that is something that comes up a lot with our coaches in the community. Is it's really hard to put a price on your value. You know, it takes quite a lot of self-reflection and confidence to be able to say, no, I'm worth this much. This is my worth, and I've attached a number to it, and that doesn't always feel great. I think some coaches resist that. Yeah, it's a really difficult one.
There's another way you can turn it round, rather than saying, you know, am I worth that as a coach? And turn it round to what results, what's it worth to you with the results that you're going to get as a consequence of us having worked together. And if you're working with a senior leader or, you know, a director of a sales team, and you know your work together means that that's where it's very tangible, and you can see that tangible result, then, you know, and I know coaches who will say, well, how about you pay me 10% of the increase in sales that you make? And that's going to be a huge amount more than what they might have quoted otherwise. So there are definitely different ways of looking at it, but I do think you need a lot of confidence, don't you, just to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that confidence comes from, I think, really believing in the work. So when you first start out, it can be harder to have that confidence, or at least to communicate that confidence. And I think as you become more experienced and the hours clock up and you see those results or outcomes, feelings, insights, you know, arriving for those clients, then that confidence builds. And I think then the pricing confidence also builds with that, for sure. And I think hearing that a lot of people are pricing with programs is also interesting, because I think just saying, well, it's this much, it's £100 a session, or it's £200 per session, whatever, can be quite difficult for a client to comprehend, because they don't necessarily know how many sessions they need, or why they might need 10, or why they might need 4. And I think if you've got a program that kind of encapsulates a process or a piece of work that you're going to go through, you know, go from here to here, this many sessions, and it's all included, it's quite reassuring, even if that may be let's call it a higher headline price than they may have anticipated. By seeing it all together, I think that often helps, definitely from the client's point of view anyway, to kind of comprehend or perceive pricing in that way.
I think it comes back to the initial conversation. So if you're a coach getting your own client work, for example, and you're going to have maybe it could be, if you're going to an organisation, you might be having a 3-way conversation with your coachee and their line manager. So you're starting to work on, well, what outcomes are we looking for here? Having said that, pricing is probably going to be agreed before you get to that stage. So it's not quite the right way around. But let's say, for example, that you have an inquiry from I don't know, Fred Bloggs down the road who's moving into a senior role, and he's going to pay for his own leadership coaching, executive coaching. And so you're having an initial chemistry call, whatever you want to call it. That chemistry call really is a sales conversation, isn't it? So yes, it's a chemistry call to see whether you want to work with this potential client, whether they want to work with you, that you feel there could be a good relationship there. And also some of the stuff they're bringing to coaching that you feel happy that you can help them to really make progress with. I think if you have a very constructive sales conversation and you're then listening for what the challenges are, so that at the end of that, when you're reflecting back, these are the areas that are going to be really helpful for us to work on. And so you're actually creating what that program is going to look like through that initial conversation that you've had. So then you can assess roughly what that program's, what's needed. You know, do you need a 360? Do you need some kind of profiling tools? You know, what areas are we going to be working on? So that if they can see that you're going to be working on all of these topics and they can understand what the benefits are going to be to them at the end of that and what's going to be different and the impact it's going to have on them personally, at work, you know, at home, wherever it is, then once you position the pricing really should reflect what their outcomes are going to be and what they're going to gain from it. So it's how you position that proposal, and it's knowing how to put a proposal together. A lot of coaches don't know how to put a proposal together, and that's very important as well. And you actually, at the end of that first initial conversation, you might not want to give a price because you want to go sit back and reflect on it. And yeah, you don't want to just throw out a number just off the top of your head.
No, and that's something we talk to a lot of coaches about, is framing that conversation in the way that's saying this conversation is just so we can understand the process, the outcomes, and make sure we're aligned. And then what I'll do is I'll go away and confirm what the process or package is going to look like, and then that will become the conversation we move on to next, which will be the commitment conversation. And by framing that conversation up front, it can really release the tension of that conversation, because the client isn't sitting there thinking, well, I'm just hurtling towards a sales pitch. And the coach or the person doing the selling isn't sitting there thinking, I'm going to have to come up with a price in a minute. And you just release that. So actually it just becomes a really friendly conversation. And then, as you say, you have that time to reflect and say, well, actually, I think the best outcome is based on our discussion. And then rather than it becoming a quote or a proposal, it's just a confirmation.
Yeah.
It's just saying, you know, this is just summarizing our conversation. And if you want to proceed, then this is what it's going to take: time, energy, and money as well. And I think that's a really sort of way of making that process feel easier, and coaches seem to resonate with that.
Yeah, and also importantly, adding on to that is having a call to action after that as well. Because again, I hear it all the time, and I've done it, is not following up after that. So the follow-up is really important, and agreeing when you're going to follow up and when you're going to come back to them so that they're ready for that and they've had time to think about it. So yes, very easy not to follow up.
One thing I do when we have conversations in that sort of sales area, we will do the conversation. We'll then say, right, okay, so we've got a good understanding of what you want. What we'll do now is we'll book in what we call a comeback call, and that'll typically be 2 weeks later. So we say, right, by the end of this week, we'll get you the confirmation, and then the end of the following week, we'll check back in and see how we want to proceed. And because everyone's excited and interested and everyone's got their calendars out, you can get that date put in. And we found that to be really effective, because then that person already knows, oh yeah, well, I'm going to speak to you. And it means you don't get this sort of odd email response to something you've spent ages for, with someone going like, nope, not for me. You know, you can actually, because they know they're going to have that conversation, it stops people just brushing it off, because they're coming back to have another call with you or a chat with you. So that can work really well as well.
I like that idea.
What's bringing to mind listening to you talking, both of you, is a couple of things. One is the gift of pricing, the gift of that consideration that you are naming, which it speaks to what we talk about in the community, which is that as coaches, well, rather as community hosts, Simon and I, and you, I'm sure, Helen, feel the same. We benefit from the emotional intelligence of our community members, who are so close to understanding most of the time, and also have the best. Do we love the word sales? Who knows? But the best kind of relationship questions to kind of get people to a place of comfort about working with them. Because that's what they do. Coaches ask wonderful questions, and pricing conversations, sales conversations, marketing in general is a series of penetrating, sort of empathetic questions. And when somebody can get a sense for what it feels like to work with you simply from the questions you ask, even if it's at board level, finance director, you know, to be seen, heard and understood in your plight as a finance director by being asked about the minutiae of something, says you really understand what I'm going through here. Thank you for asking, doesn't it? And so you can communicate so much through that.
And in addition to the questions, it's just allowing that silence for them to mull over what that question is, and allow them to think, and allow them then to share without any hurry, no rush, just having that curiosity and that just that respectful listening space for them.
Indeed. The other thing, I think, looping back to the idea of your marketing and pricing and selling being as much in service to you and your limits and boundaries as it is about getting business, particularly in mind of most of our community members who, well, actually, we have a big range. There are people doing corporate work. There are people just starting out, but a lot of them are considering their kind of product range. And I like the idea of kind of coaches feeling like personal shoppers, but with a quite definitive line of products. So it is a case of listening to what somebody needs, but then also having like a bespoke combination of things that's already something they've built. Maybe it's something they've already actually priced, that they feel contained in offering, but which at the same time they can say to somebody, I heard what you said, I can see where you are, and what I'd like to offer you is 3 sessions, this program, and then in 6 months' time we're going to be talking about that group for continued care. But it's, the sessions, the program and the group are all things that they already offer, that they already feel comfortable delivering, so they don't have to go off and like reinvent the wheel. Do you know what I mean? There's a safe both parts to create.
And I think if you know who your target market is, and so you've got offerings and packages that will fit in with those, then when you have a conversation, that you know there will be some kind of package or program there that you can pull off the shelf and say, I think this, from what you're saying, this sounds like it works for you. And also what that demonstrates, I think, is the confidence that you have in working with somebody like that client. So as a client might think, you've worked with people like me before. I feel safe in your hands. You want to create that safety, not just psychological safety, but business safety as well. That and quite often people like a structure. Although with coaches, you don't have to have a structure in the coaching conversation because it needs to be led by the client. But actually, for a client to see what this program looks like, they know that it's not going to be a never-ending interaction and they're going to be continuous shelling out. They know there's a beginning, a middle and an end to that program. I think that's quite reassuring for a lot of clients.
Absolutely.
Whether they're in corporates or individuals as well.
Totally. Yes. Being held by the shape of the program. We're coming up for time. These conversations always go very quickly and could go on much longer. We'd like to invite you to answer this question. What would you like people to know about you? What are you most keen that our listeners take away from this? And if it's a where to find you, that's a great answer.
Well, that's thank you. Well, I think before that, it's just for listeners to, assuming that the coaches who are listening to this, it's just to, have confidence that there are clients out there. There's a growing number of coaches. A lot more people are qualifying as coaches. So you hear the term, there's lots of noise out there and it's a saturated market, with coaches. But I believe there are plenty of clients out there. So don't let anyone tell you there isn't enough business out there. There's business out there. If you have your strategy right, if you know who your ideal client is, working with somebody like you, if you want to get your own clients, then you have to be a marketeer as well. You have to know how to market. You need to know how to sell. And if you're not a natural marketeer, then look for associate work, look for collaborations, look for joint ventures. There's always a way of getting coaching clients, whether it's, say, through associate work or through your own marketing activities. And one doesn't have to exclude the other, do a bit of both. So I think that's what I'd like to say, and to always continue doing your CPD, being part of communities. I think coaching can be quite lonely if you are working on your own, and can be a bit demotivating. I remember times thinking, what am I doing sat here? I actually had to go and find a little office to be part of, because I needed human interaction. So, get yourselves part of a community, very supportive community, and see other coaches as potential collaborators, not as the competition. Because that can tend to happen as well. I remember meeting other coaches when I used to do a lot of face-to-face networking. And as soon as you start talking about coaching, you can see another coach thinking, oh, I'm not going to talk to you. I want to go and talk to a potential client, and yet you can collaborate. So, a few messages. I run the Trusted Coach Directory, so we list coaches. We do have a strict criteria for coming on the directory. We do list primarily leadership and executive coaches, coaches who work within organisations, and we list coach supervisors as well. We're not a life coach directory, because there is a life coach directory, and I think they're two different markets. Yes, maybe there's a bit overlap, but they are two different markets. So our coaches must have at least 500 formal coaching hours experience, and that's post-coaching qualification, spread over at least 3 years experience. They need to have regular coaching supervision with a qualified coach supervisor, excellent references, and there must be a member of a professional coaching organisation such as the ICF, the AC, the EMCC, the IAPC&M, etc. And of course, great references for coaches who are not yet, they don't meet the criteria, but they'd like to be part of our community, where we do webinars. I was going to say not dissimilar, yet they are quite different to this, where we talk about business development topics, CPD topics. We do events for our HR community, so the great networking. We do networking opportunities. We do have a coach community membership. We've just changed it to an annual membership, which seems to be working better, and that's £85 plus that for the year. And we run events pretty much once a week, and there's the opportunity to write blogs, and so we can promote those coaches inadvertently through our social media channels. And there's access to all of our resources, over 100 recordings. And we are doing a special offer at the moment for £75 plus VAT for that year until the end of March. So email me. I'm Helen Isacke Helen at trustedcoachdirectory.com is the email address. So thank you for that opportunity, Frances.
So welcome. And you can also find Helen on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with her there. Yeah. And we'll certainly be bearing Trusted Coach Directory in mind for our members who are executive coaches, because we're finding, interestingly, that we have people coming to us who are midway through life, career, whatever. They've been incredibly successful as coaches, and they realise that they might like to actually pivot, and realise, therefore, they've got a whole load of reflection work and therefore messaging, or the other way round, that they need to be doing to change up their niche, like get into a new market, get into a new network. So they might have the hours, but they also need the support in terms of pivoting their messaging. And so we shall point them in your direction.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yeah, great to have you on. Like I say, you're one of our marketing family, and it's great that we're all working together to support the future of coaching and make it a more sustainable and accessible and irresistible thing to do.
It's true. That reminds me of I think my first mission statement. One of my mission statements was to make coaching as accessible and as affordable as training is. In organisations, you know, they'll pay for you to go on a time management training course, which isn't bespoke at all, and yet you know, you can just pay the same amount to have one-to-one coaching and have, you know, amazing results. So yes, that resonates very much, Francis. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting.
Sounds like you're on a mission then also to educate the corporate world as to what it is they need to be doing better at. The future of corporate by Helen Isacke.
Yeah, and I think, you know, they're making great headway. Lots of organisations are training their internal people to coach, which is great. They're managing with a coaching style, which is great. But there are still the smaller organisations there are still plenty of organisations who haven't embraced it as yet. So I think there's a huge amount of scope there for the coaches. Yeah.
Excellent.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.